Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon SoulSilver. In the last part, we caught ourselves a legendary and went about exploring the Safari Zone. And with all that out of the way, it's finally time for us to head east of New Bark Town and head towards the Pokémon League. Finally, it only took about 20 parts. Hello there. Hey! Do you know what you just did? You've taken your first step into Kanto. Check your Pokemon Gear map and see. Anywhere directly east on the map of New Bark Town is considered Kanto. We're now on our way back to the old Indigo Plateau from back then. Consider this a hint of things to come. Unsubtle? Yes. Do I care? Not really. And we even have a little mini dungeon to go through for this. This is Tojo Falls. There's not much to do here. This is more so railroading, because I think you can theoretically head to this route as soon as you get surf, but they want you to wait until you have waterfall to go past this point, so you're gonna need to have someone with waterfall around. Now, it's not often I usually have Gyarados as a main HM user. By and large, by the way, there's not many interesting Pokemon you can catch here. I think it's like Raticate's early Zubat line. I think Slowpokes, maybe? If there's any Pokemon that are interesting you can catch here, it's not until the latter half of the game. More on that way down the line. This room's different. Radio. There's a radio that no longer works. I'm sure that's not important. Now, the main thing with this portion of the game is that it's essentially a gauntlet rush of trainers and high-level Pokemon. A lot of the trainers have new Pokemon, though, so we gotta show them off. We're not entering the major dungeon that lies before every single Pokemon League until next port. And for our first trainer battle in the Kanto region, we got a fun one. Ace Trainer Megan here's got a Bulbasaur, the grass starter from Gen 1. Grass poison type, meaning it is weak to Flying, Fire, Psychic, and Ice. The Bulbasaur line is sort of, overall, the specially oriented line of the Gen 1 starters, but it really does get good defense stats more so as it evolves more than anything. The biggest problem with this line to me just is that its learn set and typing isn't the most ideal for attacking. Speaking of which, though, she also has its final evolution, Venusaur. Still grass poison type, it evolves in the middle form at level 32. Grass poison, so fire, flying, psychic, and ice's weaknesses. Very high defenses and good attack stats overall. It's a usable Pokemon, but I just find the fire and water starter lines for Kanto were just more useful to me, but that's partially because it really took until Gen 3 to have a very specialized grass-type starter, because the Sceptile line is so speed-based from memory. And then Torterra was really good at tanking, and from there, grass starters got a little better. The first two gens were a little rough, and man, she really has the full hat trick of the Bulbasaur line. Ivysaur, still grass poison type, evolves from Bulbasaur at level 15. Flying, Fire, Psychic, and Ice. It's Bulbasaur, but a little better. Venusaur really is a noticeable increase in stat quality. As I mentioned before, back when I was a kid, I used to play Pokemon games and choose the starter relative to the color of the version. So like Fire Red, I chose the Charmander line. In Leaf Green, I always chose the the Bulbasaur line growing up. And it works. It works especially for early game. That's one thing I really do like about Gen 1's gym layout overall, all these years later even, is they really interplay how much typing is important from the start because of the order of the gym types. And they've kind of gotten that right as well over the years, to an extent, but like, if we look here in Gen 2, for instance, first gym's flying type, so Chikorita choosers are probably in for a rough time. And if you are also the grass starter, Bugsy's gonna kick your ass, whereas water types are neutral more or less to both, and fire types can do pretty well in both. This is TM37, this is Sandstorm. It's one of the only weather-type moves I like to use here and there, but it's only because I tend to usually have a rock, ground, or steel subtyped Pokemon on my team somewhere in almost every game. Plus it means I can make funny Darude jokes, because they're not dated whatsoever, right? Right? Now, this trainer in particular also has new Pokemon. It allows me to rectify something from last part that I forgot to mention. We caught a Magneton or fought one at the Safari Zone last part, and Blake here starts off with one. I didn't go over Magneton at the time. Magneton evolves from Magnemite at level 30. Electric Steel type, so it is weak against fighting, ground, and fire. Ground is a 4 times weakness, and from memory, this line doesn't get levitate, so you can be in a little bit of trouble when it comes to ground types. That said, Magneton, good special attack stat, good, I think, physical attack stat from memory, and the rest of its stats are okay. There's just usually better electric or steel types for my type of playstyle. In Gen 4, I'd say it was worth more using overall on as it got a new evolution. And that evolution, which I believe we'll see at some point later down the line in this very LP, just is better at what it tends to do than Magneton is, as a lot of third evolutions tend to be. There's not really many evolutions that like completely change the stat focus of a Pokemon. Usually if it is, it's because of a line gimmick or something. Definitely always been one of the funniest character designs in Pokemon to me, though, because it really shows that at times Gen 1 was very literal with its Pokemon and evolutions, and it's kind of stayed that way since. Next up, we're facing another new Pokemon. This is Execute. Grass Psychic type, which means it is weak against Flying, Poison, Bug, Ghost, Fire, Ice, and Dark. Bug is a 4 times weakness. Execute's got a good defense stat, but that's all it's got for now. When it eventually evolves, once you use, I believe, a Leaf Stone on it, you do get a pretty good overall attacker. I just usually have other priorities because usually the typing or the role it tends to fill in the team is taken by one or two different Pokemon. Additionally, Execute is a case of sometimes just found way too late in any adventure it can be useful in for my tastes. I generally like to have my full team set up usually by the end of the 6th gym or a rough equivalent to 6th gym. And because of that, Pokemon usually found towards Gym 7 or 8 just tend to lose out overall for my tastes. Gen 2 really is, or I guess Johto really is the case where I usually wait until the 8th gym because a Skarmory, a Donphan, and an Ursaring go a long way in most of my type of team setups. That's mostly just my playstyle, if anything. I could go into waiting a bit more, but then I could lose out on having a high-leveled version of some Pokemon that are found early on. I think my only playthrough so far of Sword is probably the only time where I've actively changed up my team a lot towards endgame, because by the time I was reaching Gym 6, I think I completely tossed out, quote-unquote, tossed out 2 team members for something else, and that was very uncharacteristic of me. I guess in my playthrough of Arceus I did something sort of similar, but that's a little bit of a different circumstance anyway because of that game's setup. And once again, another new Pokemon. This is Quagsire, water ground type, so it is weak against grass, and it's a 4 times weakness, but that's it. It's also immune to electric. Quagsire evolves from Wooper at level 20, and you get an okay Pokemon out of it. The weakness lacks... The lack of weaknesses are easily the best thing about this Pokemon to me. As well, it's got good health, and from memory, its physical stats are pretty good. At least for a second evolution, or first evolution. It's so slow that the biggest thing you can hope to do is just tank the damage it can with the lack of weaknesses it has. It does have a good learn set from memory that tends to focus on the physical stats and moves, but overall, I love Quagsire more so because of the design more so than the usability. Look at this little guy. Unbothered by the world and not a thing happening in that brain. Same, just like me, for real, for real. Now, the route we're on right now, Route 27, does honestly have some good Pokemon you can pick up. Because most of the Pokemon here are first stage evolutions to begin with. Like, you can find the Doduo line here, I think, in SoulSilver. Sandslash and Heart Gold exclusively, I think. Quagsires, the usual water Pokemon you can find as well. I believe this is the route you can first run into the Chinchou Pokemon I brought up earlier by fishing, which is a good water electric type. So you could use them for Surf and Flash in the case you want to go to like rural islands and stuff. You can find Shelters here as well. I think you need the Super Rod for that though, and I don't think you get that until way later. This is also one of the first routes I can think about that I can talk about a very particular mechanic called a swarm. Even though you can't do that until you've beaten the game. More on that in a moment, though, because we got another new Pokemon. This is a far-fetched normal flying type, so it is weak against rock, electric, and ice. Immune to ground and ghost. Farfetch'd has nothing to really stand out about them. Gen 7, I believe their stats got rebalanced to be an okay attacker, but it really took until Galar for this Pokemon to be cool because it gained that evolution in that region that is a very good physical attacker with some decent defense stats to top that off. Poor little thing, it needed that evolution for a while, and it finally got it. It just took way too long. Now, swarms. Swarms are entirely random for when they happen, but they change the probability of finding specific Pokemon in a specific location from like 0% to I think like 40. You can find out where a swarm is and usually what Pokemon it'll be by listening to Professor Oak's radio show that you can access at any point in time. There is an entire list on Bulbapedia for what routes have what Pokemon. For instance, over on Route 47, you can find Dittos, Mount Mortar, you can find Merrills. Usually it's Pokemon that are just uncommon in that area, but in some cases, after you've beaten the game, which is when they can happen to begin with anyway, there's Pokemon that are much easier to find that way than finding them in any other route in the game, such as some Gen 3 and 4 Pokemon. By the way, I forgot to go grab this rare candy earlier, before Tojo falls, but thankfully I had to go heal, so I guess we can grab it now. Swarms became much more of an interesting mechanic starting, I believe it was Gen 7 or 8, where they were changed a little bit in how they worked, and I think they even got a different name, because mass outbreaks, I think, are technically different than the other thing. They aren't very useful overall for catching Pokemon. I'd recommend if you're trying to find a Pokemon that is only found in these games by doing an outbreak, I would just say go play the original generation and transfer them over anyway. But they're there in case you need them. They're entirely random though, so if you're looking for a specific one, good luck. Oh, also, something I like about this route, more or less every route, every trainer rather, is completely optional. It's just that they all almost have new Pokemon in some form, which is kind of annoying because you can just surf around them using Whirlpool to skip a couple of them here and there. I forget if those Whirlpools were there in the original game even, because it's been a while. Not that I would bring someone with Whirlpool onto this route because I'm trying to focus on getting the rest of my Pokemon up to level, but oh well. Speed up theme for this part, by the way, is the Sky Tower theme from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX. A fantastic song in the original game, and they made it really good in the remake. Psychic Eli here's got a new Pokemon, though, and this is Girafarig, who I brought up a few parts ago. Normal Psychic type, which means they're weak to Bug and Dark, but immune to Ghost. Girafarig's got some okay attack stats and decent speed, but it's not worth it for the single phase it is. This Pokemon doesn't evolve, so it can't get better than what it is, barring the just evolving and use of effort values and individual values and all that. There's usually just better Pokemon to get for anything this could do. It's got some okay learn sets thanks to its Psychic type addition, so it can actually do some things super effectively. There's just usually better things for your team for either normal or Psychic types. Cool design, though. And in fact, I'm a really big fan of the design we found out from that beta ROM that, I don't want to say leaked, but was discovered a few years back of Gold, Silver, and Crystal that are radically different than the final product, because it was before Iwata managed to compress the game in such a way that gave them a lot more room to do the other thing this game is famous for in the series. And God, I when that came out, I think it was the Space World 97 demo ROM or something like that. The fan art we got of all the beta Pokemon designs were so good. And we got that again a little bit for Gen 4 another year or two later, if memory serves, right? Because we got like beta Arceus design and all that. I love when stuff like that comes out about games, whether or not it's meant to or not, because seeing how things evolve, word choice, topical or not, is unintentional, as they go. Like, I love when they actively release, like, game design documents about games that are, like, 2 decades old at some point. Because you just get some cool stuff out of it, usually, is what it comes down to. Or even get good, cool stories out of it, like the Majora's Mask development story. I just find really fun, where it just was meant to be an expansion, but they were like, what if we make something new? And they were like, alright, you got a year. But we are now about to move on to a different route, I believe, once we're across this bridge. From memory, at least. We're coming up on Route 26. By and large, the Pokemon here aren't too dissimilar from the ones in the previous route, besides the fact I believe you can find Ponytas a bit more commonly here. Chinchou's. I think you can find Chinchou's evolution by eventually using the Super Rod around here. You can find Executes here, but they're part of the whole headbutt programming thing, which is really annoying, where there's 2 trees randomly selected at the start of your save file that contain the Pokemon. Which, good luck searching for those. Headbutt is one of the most annoying mechanics in the series. Oh, and also, they give you a nice little free healing spot here. I'd recommend taking advantage of that, because at this point, unless you've been going back here and there to heal back up, you're probably running low on resources. But time for once again another new Pokemon once we get past this particular Pikachu. This is Blastoise. This is the final evolution of the Squirtle line, which we haven't weirdly seen Squirtle. We've seen Wartortle and Blastoise now, though. Evolves from Wartortle, level 36, Water-type, pure, so that means it's weak to Electric and Grass. Blastoise is definitively the defense focus for the Gen 1 starters. It's not bad at attacking, and it's decently fast. There's seldom a starter I would just call bad, is what it comes down to. Are there ones that are maybe worse for particular people's playstyles, like whether or not they like to start with a defensive Pokemon or an attack one or something like that? Yeah. The only one I would call outright bad so far, from memory at least, is probably just Chikorita's line, unfortunately. Because for the Pokemon that start off in the game around you, and the evolutionary stats and the moveset, the Chikorita line just really pales in comparison to either of its contemporaries in its own generation. There are ones I'm not a fan of design-wise. Like, I'm not a fan of Chespin or the middle evolution of that line, but Chestnut's cool looking. This is one of the later Apricorn trees in the game from memory, because the latter half of the game definitely from memory has fewer of them. But it's also a thing of I'm probably not bothering with them nearly as much, because I just don't care. Like I mentioned before, the Apricorn Pokeballs aren't inherently bad, but the amount that you get at a time is just not worth the time you put into grinding them up. On top of that, while the Apra Juice is definitely more useful, that not everyone's going to bother with Pokeathlon. There's something written here. Rate it? Sure. To my brothers and sisters, we take pride in serving Pokemon trainers. When trainers talk to you, give them something useful. Love, Monica. Keep reading? Sure. Monday, Monica, Route 40. Tuesday, Tuscany, Route 29. Wednesday, Wesley, Lake of Rage. Thursday, Arthur, Route 36. Friday, Frida, Route 32. Saturday, Santos, Blackthorn City. Sunday, Sunny, Route 37. So, I think I've mentioned them offhand before once or twice, and definitely shown off a couple of locations they can be. But there are NPCs known as the, I think, day siblings or week siblings, something like that. I forget the name for the actual group overall. Essentially, on a certain day of the week, a certain NPC will be present on the route mentioned that you need to find, and talking to them will give you a specific Pokemon held item. Talking to them to a second time on that day of the week, the next week usually, will give you one of the earliest instances you can find in the game, barring Pokeathlon, of a ribbon. Ribbons are details on Pokemon subscreens to show what they've done. There's not much of a purpose to them in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. From memory, in, I want to say, Sinnoh and Unova, there's a bit more purpose, because I believe there's areas you can only enter if a Pokemon on your team has a certain amount of ribbons on them. It's not very important. I'll show them off down the line, towards the end of the game, but that's then, this is now. You probably accidentally run into at least one on your playthrough, honestly, depending on the pace of the game you're going through. But time for some more new Pokemon. This is Victory Bell. This evolves from Weepin' Bell when you use a Leaf Stone on it. This is Bellsprout's final phase. Still a Grass Poison type, so it's still weak to Flying, Fire, Psychic, and Ice. Victory Bell is a surprisingly good attacker that you get out of such an early game fragile Pokemon. The biggest problem is it's still relatively fragile, it's not very good on the defenses, its HP isn't anything super spectacular, and it's not very fast. This is sort of a glass cannon-y Pokemon overall, I'd say. The big problem for it, again, is usually the Bellsprout learn set is very more status ailment focused than actual damage focused. Next up, though, we got another new Pokemon. This is Kingler, evolving from Krabby at level 28. Pure water type, so it's weak to grass and electric. This is a great physical Pokemon. Great physical attack, great physical defense, and it's got some okay speed. It's not very useful for special type moves or HP, though, is the big thing for it. Prior to the physical special split, this Pokemon wasn't super good for me because there weren't any good same attack bonus moves it could learn. But in Gen 4 beyond, I think this Pokemon's pretty usable because you got some good physical water moves you can learn and some other really good physical moves you can learn just by leveling up, period. And with TMs, you got some pretty good stuff you can do there. Again, though, for my water types, I usually prefer things with higher special stats because I like to have Surf on my team. Because Surf and Strength just are really good HMs to use as battle moves still. Waterfall can be depending on the water type you're using. I guess if you wanted to have one on a Kingler, that'd be a good move. There's one other HM that I'd say is a good battle move, but that's more so a Gen 4 one. Oh yeah, Tiny Mushrooms exist. Those are a weird item, because they're very inconsistent on what they're used for. Usually they're just for selling. In fact, sometimes there's NPCs that'll buy them for more than their usual Pokemart sell value. They were at their most useful in, I think it was Fire Red and Leaf Green, where I think a move rememberer used them as currency. Speaking of mushrooms, though, time for Parasect. Unless I edited one of these out beforehand, really late to find one of these. Evolves from Paras level 24, bug grass type, meaning it is weak against flying, poison, rock, bug, fire, and ice. Flying and fire, two very common types, are 4 times weaknesses. It's okay at attacking, it has okay defenses, but it's pretty slow. The big purpose to using Parasect, in my eyes, is for Pokemon catching, as it can learn a lot of good status ailment moves for catching through its excess use of the Spore-type moves, but there's just usually better Pokemon for that period, including one I mentioned before, Smeargle. More on that down the line. For now, though, let's talk about a much more interesting Pokemon. This is Golduck, evolves from Psyduck at level 33, pure water type, so it's weak against grass and electric. Golduck doesn't really have any super standout stats. It's got some good special attack and speed, but it's a perfectly good Pokemon because there's no real weaknesses to it, barring its actual like typing weaknesses. There's just usually more specialized Pokemon I like to use myself. I've used Golduck plenty of times. It's worth it, I'd say. I'll always remember the episode of the anime where Golduck was just gaslighting Misty into thinking that it was her Psyduck evolved. I don't know why that stuck with me all these years, but it has. Now, if there's something I could say I'm impressed with Johto in general looking back, it's the pace at which they introduce new Pokemon. Because I had to go back and dig out my old notes for when we encountered new Pokemon so I could go over them in my Fire Red LP. At this point, in comparison, we had only seen 117 Pokemon across Kanto. Mind you, the remakes are also very usually pretty restrictive with what Pokemon you can encounter at what point in time. Like, you only encounter Kanto Pokemon during the main playthrough of Fire Red Leaf Green, and you only encounter Johto and Kanto Pokemon through the main campaign of Heart Gold Soul Silver. But the pacing of how they introduce them I genuinely find pretty impressive for this one in particular. Because from memory, by the end of a usual playthrough of like Gen 3 Beyond, like just meaning to get to the end of the Pokémon League, Elite Four, and Championship, I usually find far fewer Pokemon in the Pokedex. Mind you, I'm usually doing a lot less on a casual playthrough than I did through this. For instance, barring the actual catching of the Legendary, I usually just only do trainers that are in my way, not like every trainer. Which I probably should get a lot better about doing for casual playthroughs, but also like, eh. Oh god, now that I think about it, I haven't even thought about it before. For Scarlet and Violet, I wonder how they're gonna structure Pokemon trainer battles. Because they were such a afterthought in Arceus. Maybe they'll have some linear routes within the actual areas? Well, guess we'll find out. Either way, final new Pokemon for the part. This is Rapidash. Evolves from Ponyta at level 40. Pure Fire type, so it is weak against ground, rock, and water. This is a pretty fast physical attacker. Meaning, prior to Gen 4, this wasn't a very good Fire type. At least for Fire type moves. But nowadays in Gen 4 beyond, this is a very good Fire type attacker. Because there's good Fire type attacks that are physical, there's good physical moves it can learn, and then it has stuff like Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp is a move I need to remember to use more often, I find. Because I usually just see it and think, well, I'll burn, that'll do good damage every turn, I guess, but I'm trying to 1 or 2 shot Pokemon anyway. For some reason, when I'm playing, just mentally completely forget about the halved physical attack stat it inflicts as well. Which, for a lot of Pokemon, is a lot more important. Because having a physical attack stat, for me, in my case at least, is a lot more important than just lowering the attack stat or special attack stat of a Pokemon by, like, 1 stage. I recommend Rapidash if you can find one. You can find Ponytas, I think, in the last 2 routes relatively commonly in the grass. You might have to try for a little bit, but you can find one. They're pretty good. But we've found ourselves at the end of Route 26, but I'm going to briefly ignore the actual route ending real quick to come down here and grab this item and then go heal, because I am running low on HP at this point. And hey, a Max Elixir is pretty good to have around. That's a full PP recovery on every move in a Pokemon. I'd recommend using that specifically only in endgame challenges. Welcome to the gate. Only trainers who have proven themselves may pass. Oh, the 8 badges of Johto. Please, go right on through. We're approaching endgame here. This way leads to Mount Silver. You see scary strong Pokemon out there. You're not ready for it. No, we are not. Huh? This way leads to Kanto, but this path's blocked for the time being, I'm afraid. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 20, we venture through Victory Road before starting off our Pokemon League challenge. See you guys then.